Good morning and welcome to another video with G Borders Home Repair Improvement. Here's our project today. We're going to be doing a little drywall repair. Stay tuned. All right, the first step we always take is to square off the opening. The plumbers are typically rough with their openings. You want to move that level just a second there. You can see how when the plumbers cut it, they don't get even close to straight square lines. And if you have a square opening, your repair is going to be much easier and a better repair in the end. The next step is to try to keep things clean and tidy, so we'll tape some masking to the baseboard. Our how-to videos aren't just for the DIYer that wants the best results given good tips and processes on a project. It's also for the homeowner that hires the projects out, so they have a good understanding of the work that is done or should be done and what it is they're paying for. Here we lay out the paper, give a good clean tear at the end, or something like a clean tear.
Close to a clean tear.
And then it's just attach the paper to the tape and then fold it along the baseboard so don't pull it off as you go on it. You can see here the plumber did cut above the baseboard a little bit, and that gives us an opportunity to patch into the drywall that is left and not have to pull off and replace the baseboard. It's like I say, we normally don't run into this, but the exterior sheeting was cut and it actually goes up another 4 or 5 inches past the cut in this external drywall. So we've taken this piece of drywall that just came off as a patch, and I have this PAM hot melt gun, which we'll probably do in a review at some point, and we're just going to use the hot melt to both adhere it to the exterior sheeting on the inside, and it will also provide a bit of a seal against the draft coming in here, which is the whole purpose of what it is we're doing. Here we're laying out some insulation to cut the length to fit the open spaces in the wall cavities. Basically just to stretch it out, and then against a hard surface like the board we have there, just make the cut. Then you'll have to cut through the insulation because you won't get it in the first cut. Press it down tight and draw the knife. Always good to have a sharp blade. And the insulation just pressed into the cavity. Of course, you don't want to compress it any more than you have to. Make sure it's tied up against the existing with the paper facing out. We'll get all the cavities filled, and then we'll be ready for the drywall. So sometimes you'll run into a situation where you can't cut the drywall to the stud as we did over here, so we can support both sides of the drywall with the stud that's there. Here the outlet's in the way and the stud's on the other side, so what we do to keep the joint strong and flat is cut a piece of what we call dead wood and secure that to both sides of the drywall, the existing and the patch, and that provides a good flat surface to mount the patch to. All right, now what we'll do is we'll make sure that the existing drywall is tight to the studs where our patch is going to be, so that the new joint there is good and flat and plenty strong. And our next step now is to get a measurement for our patch. We'll get the dimensions we need, and then we will go outside and cut the patch. This will be nothing new to anybody. You simply transfer the measurements you took from the inside and put it to the patch, and take a razor and score it and then snap it. But we'll film it anyway, just because, you know, everybody does. And for the first couple of coats, we're going to use this 5-minute. If it was more of it, or it's going to take longer to get everything taped and bedded in, we'd have used the 20-minute or maybe the 45, depending on how extensive the repair or the work is. But for a small project like this, 5 minutes is enough to get it on, and then it really cuts down the time between coats. I don't know how many of you guys suffer from the same problems I do, but no matter how you try to keep your truck clean and organized, every time you get into it, and the stuff you have to keep, because you never know what you're going to run into, you know, it gets a little cluttered. And this is after a recent cleanup. Like I mentioned, we're going to be using this 5-minute hot mud, which is a water and powder mix. And almost anytime you mix it, you slosh it around a little bit. And when you're working in a lived-in furnished home, make sure you put something down, because you're almost inevitably going to spill either the powder or the mix or some of the slurry water from it. And this stuff doesn't wash out well with water, especially once it sets up. So a little careful going into it makes a big difference on keeping the work site clean. At the moment we've all been waiting for, attaching the drywall patch to the studs. Matter of getting screws on both sides of the joint. And if, depending on how big the patch is, you would put one in the center between. We like to pre-fill the joints, try to push the compound into the joint. If you get it in there nice and tight, the idea is to hopefully it presses through a little bit and works a little bit like a plaster and lath joint, where it pushes through and kind of expands on the back side. And in any event, you want to fill the joint so that there's really little or no open space between the patch and the existing wall.
All right, so we are ready for our second coat. One thing I like to do before we start our second coat is I like to get in here. I'll show y'all. You can see all these rough spots here in our first coat of mud. And what I like to do before we start is I'll take my sponge and just kind of give it like just a light kind of sponge off to smooth it out. So that way when you go over it again with your second coat with your knife, you're not getting all those bumps and ripples and everything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and smooth everything out. And I like to do this between all of my coats. I think it just comes out looking better. There's less sanding, and if there's anything you don't want to do, it's sand. So you'll just kind of go through, look for all the big spots, the rough bumps, stuff like that. And if there's any like big chunks, like you got like a big ridge in there or something like that, you can just take your drywall knife and knock that down. But we don't have any of that with our first coat here. So I'm just going to smooth it all out, and then we will mix up our mud and hit it a second time. Okay, we are back and we are ready to get started on our second coat. We'll be using the bigger knife. It'll just help level everything out, make it look nice and smooth. And we're going to be using the 5-minute mud again. So you got to be a little quick with it. And all that we're doing on this coat is just kind of filling everything in and making sure it'll be nice and ready for our final coat. You want to go a little bit over the initial taping bed. This will help hide the repair as you bring it out more and go into the existing a little bit here. And make sure you get plenty on your knife to kind of fill in the middle area here. So let me show you how this is going to look. This is our final coat. We'll come back tomorrow to do the sand and everything. You'll see some ridges and some rough spots. Those will sand out. And you want it relatively flat. The flatter it is, the less sanding you have to do. And you don't want to do any sanding.
So we'll get a little bit of masking along the bottom again, and we've got to mask off this window after sanding so that we, as we spray texture, we don't get it everywhere. If you have one of these masking rigs, that's great. It makes things quicker, but you can always do it with just regular masking tape and paper or plastic. And generally speaking, you know, we would use a hopper like this and an air compressor to blow texture onto the wall, but in a small little project like this, we're going to use this little Wagner version, which we've tested before and have had good results with on small projects. I don't know that I'd recommend something like that on a larger deal, but for what we were doing here, I think it'll be absolutely fine. And this kind of gives you an idea of the consistency of the mud. It's not quite pouring, and it might actually have been a little thinner maybe, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And that's right, ladies, Blaine's still available, so. Okay, and this is the actual shooting numbers, and we'll make a little noise here. And just like in the, when you bring the compound up past the original joint, you'll want to bring the texture spray up into the existing to blend in better and get a better match. Here we go. Back on day 3 of our project, we are here to do final touch-ups and paint. And one of the things we discovered while we were here is there's a little stress crack or settling crack in this corner that the customer doesn't want to go through the cutting out the tape and bedding and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to, for now, smooth that out with a little bit of a caulk, and then we'll touch up that corner. We'll paint our little section here with a couple of coats of paint. Oops, our section there with a couple of coats of paint, and then this project will be wrapped up. Here we've applied the caulk. This is actually a clear caulk, it'll dry, but you put in a little bead of caulk there and then smooth it out, and of course that leaves ridges on both sides, but it kind of fills the crack. And then what we like to do is go back with a sponge to take the excess out of the texture. It just leaves it a little smoother on the ends, and it's a better blend. Not that you won't ever see that this has been done if you look for it, but it's just a much better caulk joint in general. Part of the paint project is before you get started, we like to delint our roller covers. We use pretty White Dove typically, and it's a very good quality roller, but every now and then you'll take off a little lint or fuzzy in there. Plus any dust or debris that may have gotten on it since you unpacked it. This is our after shot. Of course, the paint is still wet, so it looks a little darker perhaps, but that's a nice repair, and the customer seems pretty happy.